seen anyone step back this far before. For this guy to be able to do this in college, not pros where you get your skill set a little bit higher, but in the college scene.
So dirty. Cardiac Kemba started in March, baby.
Woohoo! And speaking of, we're going to run it back to Kemba's nastiest NBA step backs last season in Boston on Landry Shamet in double OT.
Landry, fella.
Dirty.
Oh, sorry.
When your knee almost touched the ground.
The youth of today.
Yeah, he gonna need that youth to prepare those knees.
Yep. 2014 on Brandon Knight. Now he got teed up after because he thought he got fouled and he had a little argument over it.
Yeah, you gotta argue.
Worth it.
Yes.
Right? Boom.
Worth the fine when you get a play that's so good. I mean, I love it, and I love his fierceness, but that one was dirty. I mean, he's crazy with the handle.
This is also 2014. Breaks the ankles of Nikola Mirotic.
Man, it's so bad when you have these bigs on you. It just looks like a scarecrow going down in a windstorm.
All right. I give Nikola credit there. He's like, I'm going to take a nap here and we'll be good. It's not a problem at all. Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols, joined by our 7-time NBA champ. That's so fun to say. Robert Horry, and former #1 overall pick in the WNBA draft, Miss Chiney Ogwumike. Star of stage, screen, and commercials, by the way, I should say about Chiney. Coming up, as we approach the 1-year anniversary of the NBA postponing its season, we will reflect on how that day changed everything. Our insiders are going to be joining us for that discussion. First, though, welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Yep, the shortest All-Star break in recent memory is already over. Play starts back up again tonight as the NBA begins its all-out sprint toward the postseason. And there are a lot of questions out there, some very basic, like, will each team actually play its schedule this year? Even with the docket reduced to just 72 games, it's going to take some serious work to get in everything that was postponed in the first half of the season. The Grizzlies and the Spurs each have 40 games left to play in a span of just 68 days. And that's only with what we're dealing with as of now. What if there's a whole new COVID outbreak in one of those franchises? At some point, the NBA can't keep postponing games and may just have to cancel some, since the playoffs have to start on time, so they can end on time before the Olympics. That pressure on the calendar, it's a big deal, and it's one of the reasons you are starting to hear NBA officials talk so much more about the COVID vaccine. As Adam Silver noted this past weekend, the new guidance from the CDC is that people who are vaccinated don't have to quarantine, even if they are directly exposed to someone who has the virus, which means that players who do get the shot won't have to sit anymore for contact tracing, which in turn would lead to more available players and fewer postponements, and maybe even relatively full arenas by the time we get to the playoffs. Still, COVID hardly the only question as we push into the second half here. The trade deadline is just a couple weeks away, and it promises to be a weird one. More teams will hit the deadline in playoff contention than ever before, thanks to the new play-in games that keep even the conference's 10th seeds in the mix. That means fewer sellers and more buyers, plus chum in the water in the buyout market that has frankly already started. Yes, that was Blake Griffin and Steve Nash having coffee in Brooklyn yesterday as the Nets welcomed their newest teammate. So will Brooklyn romp through the second half of the season and enter the playoffs as the clear favorite in the East? Where does that leave Giannis? And what will Joel Embiid have to say about it as he also tries to win his first MVP? Yes, brace yourself. This second half, we will have a lot of debate over the MVP as it is shaping up to be one of the more competitive races in years. There's also going to be a lot of talk about whether seeding matters in the West. Will the Jazz stay atop the conference? They sure could with the easiest schedule in the league for the rest of the way here. How much more bubble wrap will the Lakers decide to keep Anthony Davis in, even if it hurts when they sit where they sit in the bracket? Well, that will also be a factor. Will the Suns be able to keep up the good vibes? What about the Knicks, who've got one of the NBA's tougher second-half schedules? Personally, I've noted the whole way here. I am less focused on the Knicks' actual win-loss record than I am on the team finally starting to feel like a competent franchise. If they can keep turning the ship in the right direction, it's going to be a successful season, even if they don't make the playoffs. The same, of course, can't be said for Boston or Denver or Miami, which have each underperformed expectations so far. Will they all improve in the second half? The answer, of course, is We don't know, which is part of what makes sports so fun in the first place. So hopefully you got some snacks during the very briefest of intermissions here, because it's time to follow your ushers and settle back into your seat. The curtain goes back up tonight. So, Robert, what team do you think is under the most pressure in the second half of the season?
With the addition of Blake Griffin, it has to be the Brooklyn Nets, because you already had the three-headed monster with KD, Harden, and Kyrie. With them now getting this guy, Blake Griffin, who was an all-star, dunk champion, all these things that come along with him, there's got to be a lot of pressure on you guys, because now you think about this. KD and James already been to the finals and lost. So that's more pressure on them than it is Kyrie, because Kyrie's won the championship. Blake hasn't even been in the running to be in the conference finals. So there's a lot of pressure on the Brooklyn to get to the finals and win it. Not just get there, because getting there doesn't mean anything. They have to win it with that crew.
Well, KD, of course, won, but not when he was playing with Harden. Absolutely. What about you, Chiney? What's your second half pressure cooker team?
Yeah, well, there's similar storylines going on in the East and in the West, but there's more pressure in the West on the Lakers and LeBron James for an answer that my guy Robert said on First Take earlier today, because of health. Even though they are without, Kevin Durant right now, they still have a lot. They're getting Blake Griffin. They already have James Harden, who has, masterfully changed roles. And then you've got Kyrie Irving. Who does LeBron James have? He has a supporting cast that we're trying to figure out, will they step up? They're really missing Anthony Davis, his 22 points, his 8 rebounds a game. And so I think, especially in a year where 2 seasons are wrapped into one for LeBron James, your number one star is 36 years old, you're waiting on AD to come back, they're feeling the pressure, even if it doesn't amount in changing in the standings. And your girl always comes with some nuggets. Since the 2020, bubble restart, no player has logged more minutes, scored more points, handed out more assists, made more shots, taken more shots, or finished off more fast breaks than LeBron James. He's literally doing it all since the bubble started, and now we have that 71-day turnaround, and so it's 2 seasons wrapped into one. A lot of pressure on LeBron James. The cool thing, Rach, is he's built for it, right? But the question is, will he have enough? Will there be enough synergy to sort of repeat once again, hopefully, when AD comes back?
Robert, you were with the Lakers almost every night. What do you think?
She's totally right. We always talk about load management and how we wanted to load manage LeBron. He got mad at everybody. But this is why we wanted to load manage you, because you've done so much. Think about it. 36 years old, been in the league, gone to the finals so many times. That's a lot of miles on your body. So we're not saying that you cannot do it. We're saying just take the time so we can get the best performance out of LeBron in the finals, because he's going to the finals. There's nobody in the West can really stop him except the Clippers. And I don't think the Clippers are going to.
You just snuck that take in?
You got to slide that in there, because
I know, right?
with the Clippers giving up Montrezl Harrell and guys like that, they don't have the punch off that bench like they used to. So LeBron has to take a step back. I think this All-Star break was great for him, because he didn't play as many minutes in the All-Star game as he probably would have liked. So
kidding?
all the Laker fans were like, yes.
He was snacking on the bench, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's LeBron, doing his thing and always going to be there for you. And he's amazing. He's a machine.
All right, I want to move on to the Heat and a much more serious situation with forward Myers Leonard. He is dealing with the consequences from footage that surfaced yesterday where he was heard using an anti-Semitic slur during a video game live stream. Leonard will be away from the Heat indefinitely as a result. The NBA said it was, quote, gathering more information about the incident. Here's part of the apology that Leonard posted on social media on Tuesday. Quote, I am deeply sorry for using an anti-Semitic slur during a live stream yesterday. While I didn't know what the word meant at the time, my ignorance about its history and how it is offensive to the Jewish community is absolutely not an excuse, and I was just wrong. I am now more aware of its meaning. I am committed to properly seeking out people who can help educate me about how this type of hate works and how we can fight it. The Heat statement on Leonard read in part, quote, the Miami Heat vehemently condemns the use of any form of hate speech. The words used by Myers Leonard were wrong, will not be tolerated, hateful language from anyone associated with our franchise. To hear it from a Miami Heat player is especially disappointing, hurtful to all those who work here, as well as the larger South Florida, Miami Heat, and NBA communities. And you also got a weigh-in from prominent Jewish athlete and 3-time Super Bowl champ Julian Edelman. He wrote an open letter to Leonard, which included this, quote, I get the sense that you didn't use the word out of hate, more out of ignorance. Casual ignorance is harder to combat, has greater reach, especially when you command great influence. Hate is like a virus, Julian wrote. Even accidentally, it can rapidly spread. Chiney, what's your reaction to the situation?
I think Julian was so on par. But, first and foremost, I think that the Miami Heat and the NBA are already going down the right path, starting with an investigation for ultimately probably punishment, maybe a fine, right, for Myers Leonard, and rightfully so, because the energy that I'm on, and I think that most people are on these days, whether it's public or private, there's zero tolerance for hate speech. I mean, period. As a society, we've been having these conversations, especially after the summer of 2020, where it's like now being heightened, those emotions and feelings, where we've been actively educating ourselves on where we stand. And this was another instance of whether, Julian Edelman brings up a great point about, it being, hate or ignorance or even casual ignorance, which he sort of identified as the hardest one, the one that's more pervasive, the one that's harder to address. And so using that opportunity to mend that fence was very commendable, by Julian. But overall, these are necessary conversations that need to be had. I'm glad that the Miami Heat are already, having this indefinite leave so that he can go through acts of contrition to all the parties that have felt, offended, whether it is public in the apology or private, because we know his ownership, group is Jewish, the owner of the team, also CEO. And so this is not something that, I didn't know I said it. It's like we have to be accountable for our words. And the craziest thing is this was on his own platform that he gets paid on, through his partnerships. And just to be comfortably saying something that you may not be consciously of, even though you're live, it just sort of shocks me. I think it just is a greater opportunity for all of us to educate ourselves and make sure that we stay on point, because this was not it.
This is totally not it. And for me, I'm looking at this guy who's a pretty popular streamer. Mm-hmm. So that means he has a lot of young kids looking at him. Now, these kids have heard that. They don't know what this word means, but they heard Miles use it. Mm-hmm. And so now they're going to go out and use the same word in the same way, thinking it's cool because this guy's it. So that's my biggest part. Don't give me a half apology. I'm not really satisfied with the apology. I hate when guys come out and say, I'm gonna put this on my Instagram or my Twitter, whatnot. No, you got Instagram, get on there, let me see your face. Let me see the words come out of your mouth. Let me feel that heartfelt sorrowfulness of you saying this statement. And for me, I just can't let him slide with this statement. I hope the organization does something, because if we look across the way, we had an owner who said something and he was had his team taken from him. I don't want this guy's career to be taken from him for words, but I do want some punishment to be held out, but remaining for the rest of the season, him be banished from the team, no pay, to make him really feel this and make him research and understand what he said and how hurtful these words can be.
Now, of course, he's been away from the team because of an injury, and even this being away from the team now officially, it is still with pay. This is part of the agreement that the Players Union has with the league. The league is the one that metes out discipline. There's an interesting piece this morning from Ira Winderman in the South Florida Sun-Sentinel looking at different punishments in the past for using slurs. He said that it was about a $50,000 fine was the maximum the NBA can levy, that they are typically also allowed to give a suspension. So a one-game suspension is what we've seen in the past. And according to the Sun-Sentinel, one-game suspension, that paycheck would be an additional $65,000 of Myers' salary. I do just want to read you guys one thing. In the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., there's a quote up on a wall, and it actually comes from someone who wasn't Jewish. He was a Lutheran pastor who lived through the Nazis in World War II, and he was actually put in a concentration camp because of his opposition to Adolf Hitler. And this quote is, "First they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." We've had so many conversations this year about what we owe each other, right? Do we owe each other wearing a mask? Do we owe each other being safe? What we owe each other so often is to raise up the people around us when other people take shots at them, even if those shots aren't at us specifically. We can do that in this league, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the league reacts to this. I know that they will. All right, coming up, we got to get back to basketball. Caesars William Hill now listing Joel Embiid as the betting MVP favorite. Does the panel agree? We will discuss that. First, though, time for our distant replay. This date, 2004. Hey, J. Kidd. Hey, Kmart.
Scalabrini knocked it away. Kidd feeds. Scalabrini behind the
Oh, man.
Kmart is
behind the back.
We're going to check in with Kenyon sometime soon. He hasn't been on the show in a while.
He's TV ready. He's been doing the Sierra Canyon thing, so he's TV ready.
Yo, Mass. That is over on ESPN.com. And check out these numbers, including the playoffs. 61 games in NBA history have featured at least 90 three-point attempts. 45 of those 61 have occurred since the start of last season, according to ESPN Stats and Info. The three-pointer now represents about 40% of all field goal attempts, which is up 61% from if we go back like 10 years, basically. So really excited to have Robert and Chiney here for this topic because, look, Robert, you played with the three-point line your entire career. You hit some huge threes. Again, his nickname, Big Shot Rob, just saying. But the volume back then was nowhere near what we're seeing in today's game. So how many threes is too many threes for you?
I think for me, 30 is that tipping point. And for me, I'm watching the game now, and it's kind of like, who is not a three-point shooter? You have these bigs that cannot shoot threes and they're shooting threes. Yes, I know 3 is more than 2. We learned this in preschool,
right.
and this is, but does it really matter if you're 3 for 10 and you can't shoot it? Everybody thinks that's good. That is poor. You gotta shoot. If you're gonna shoot 10 threes, you gotta at least make 6. That means you're hot. So I just can't do it. All these guys are shooting 3, and I blame Steph and I blame Damon because after watching
well, they
them,
turn around and blame you, Robert. So there you go.
They've taken it to a whole new level now. But the 3 game has messed up the game because now everybody thinks they can shoot it. Go back to being Joel Embiid. You see what he's doing. I know he shoots a couple, but he's making his bread and butter in the paint.
Look, I'm trying to get like Robert, okay? I'm trying to get that 3 in my arsenal. And when I think about this three-point explosion, I think it's more so obviously a product of analytics the last few years. But this season especially, let's talk about it. With that short turnaround, a lot of teams might be a little bit more gassed, right? They're trying to put up points. So if I'm a coach, I'm probably telling them, hey, we're going to shoot threes and then, look to get to the rim, not necessarily like doing too much in the mid-range. And so that's a strategy that I've heard from my personal coaches say, hey, we're on a back-to-back. Let's line it up. Let's spread the floor. Let's keep the ball moving. Attack the rim when you have a lane, but let's try to find each other from 3. So I do think that this season it's interesting with the number, but overall I'm not surprised. And that's because the way the game is right now, Rach and Rob, like it's crazy. You can't be a player without incorporating the three-point shot as a part of your arsenal. That's just the standard for players growing up right now. That's what you're forced to be able to do. Maybe you're the small ball 5, right? Or the 1 center, but people expect you to not, use that as a weakness as a part of your game. And so the threes are here to stay. I think for the future, every hooper that's about to develop and grow, they're going to have that three-point shot as a part of their arsenal. I was a part of maybe the last few, the kids that played outside. We could be a post and all that type of stuff, and you could just bang at the rim. The game has changed, and I don't think it's going back.
Well, look, Chiney, we can tell Robert why I always say in these discussions, yes, 3 is more than 2, but 2 is more than 0. So if you have a good shot that's a mid-range shot or close to the hoop, you should also just take that one. I will say as a fan, it is fun when Damian Lillard or Steph pull up from where they pull up from because they make the baskets.
I'm ready for the 4-pointer.
Chuck, dude, right? So in the All-Star game, we should get a 4-pointer at least.
Yes.
All right, let's move on. I promised some MVP conversation at the top of the show, and yes, indeedy, Caesars William Hill Sportsbook has now moved Joel Embiid into the MVP favorite slot heading into the second half of the season. It is the 3rd different player atop the MVP odds so far. Luka, remember, came into the year as the favorite. Then he was overtaken by LeBron, who is currently now in 2nd, with Embiid in 1st. I like to always remind people, these are betting odds. They are based on who Las Vegas feels will attract the most money put on these guys, not a basketball analyst deciding who is most likely to win MVP. But that being said, Chiney, do you buy Embiid as the MVP favorite?
I do, and I'd like to first acknowledge that, Rach, when it comes to the NBA Offensive Player of the Year and 4-point line, we stay on the same team.
Thank you. Chiney has my back.
Agree here.
My back.
Always. I agree here. I think Joel Embiid has emerged as the MVP in the NBA just because the last 2 weeks have changed a lot. The Lakers, I believe, have lost 6 out of their last 8 games. But what Joel Embiid has done, we've asked him to do 2 things, right? To be consistent with his game and then also be available with his health. And he's delivered on both of those things. Number 1 in the East, with the standings. And he's given you a 30-point double-double, 30 and 11, a very similar narrative that earned Giannis, with the best record in his conference. And the those same statistics, the MVP award a few years ago. And so Joel Embiid has sort of been that consistent one, getting his team to win, producing on the floor. And when we're talking about three-point shots, I think he's shooting like 41 to 42% from three, which is super impressive. He's picking and choosing better shots this year, which is why Philly has a shot to really rival the Brooklyn Nets to sort of compete this year in a way that we never really expected.
The thing about being in the East, everybody in the East watches their games and then go to sleep. So they're sleeping on LeBron James. LeBron James every year has to do something to let everybody know he's still the man. It's amazing. Last year, he said, okay, I'm going to lead the league in assists. This year, I'm leading the league in everything. But I don't get enough respect. I just said, he wants his damn respect. Give this man his respect. But, I will. I'm a big at heart, and I love Joel Embiid, and he's doing his thing over there in Philly. But come on, LBJ and MJ always got slighted on the MVP, so we know who the real MVP is. But okay, pass it around, give it to Joel Embiid. Okay, it's cool, but we all know it should be LBJ.
It's gonna be a good race. It's gonna be good. There's so many names in the conversation, and we'll see who comes to the front as we go here.
Stunning isn't the right word. It's crazy.
Tonight's game has been postponed. Breaking news from the NBA, the league has been suspended.
You think this is, it's not going to affect us. We're the NBA. One of our players has the coronavirus. These are things that you watch in movies.
To play in an empty, quiet arena, it would be different. It'd be strange. We just won't know until or if that does happen.
Yes, it was a year ago tomorrow when everything changed. And I now want to bring in ESPN senior writer Ramona Shelburne, our reporter Royce Young. Ramona, you've been working on a lot of podcasts, big piece about all of this. You've been all over it. Take us through what you've learned on the quick decisions that had to be made that night with Adam Silver, Michelle Roberts, and those in the building in Oklahoma City.
Well, Rach, one of the things that was surprising to me as we dug into this, which was that the first person who really learned about Rudy Gobert's positive test was the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, who just so happened to be at the Thunder game that night. Now, Royce knows he's a fan of the Thunder. He goes to games, but he was there that night because he had a business meeting with a local company. His commerce secretary asked him to go. He gets a phone call about 10 minutes before the game, and okay, there's a positive test on the Utah Jazz. What does that mean? He immediately calls Clay Bennett in, the owner of the Thunder, Sam Presti, Rob Hannigan, and they huddle in this conference room trying to decide what to do. As soon as they get Adam Silver on the phone, they said, Clay Bennett says to Adam Silver, Adam, what is the NBA's policy on this? What should we do with the game tonight? And Adam says, well, what's the state policy?
Right.
And Clay Bennett says, well, I got the governor right here. And it's amazing to me how much of that decision was made in about 10 minutes right before the game in a little conference room there at Chesapeake Energy Arena, where, and Royce, this is where I'll pass off to you because you were sitting right there when this happened. Rob Hennigan and the trainer for the Thunder say, okay, they decide we got to postpone the game. So they run out onto the court, and Royce, I'll hand off to you. What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, what the most bizarre thing there is how quickly it escalated. And, as we all know, and we've seen in NBA games, that's not a typical sight to see people running off the bench onto the court right as the team is literally about to throw the ball up. I mean, they got the song going and everything. The players are huddling around. And so it was not an expected moment to see.
Yeah, what do you remember just from being in the building as the hours ticked by, Royce? Because you went thinking you were covering a basketball game. You turned into being a reporter on crisis coverage. And I felt like we at ESPN did not let you leave. I just felt like hour after hour there was Royce Young. What do you remember about how that day kind of went for you?
It's funny, Rachel, at one point, nobody was sure if the Jazz would leave either. Sam Presti was actually arranging cots to see if the Jazz needed to stay at the arena that night.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, Sam, can I get a cot too? Because I ain't going anywhere either if the Jazz aren't leaving. But, it's funny that Ramona mentions Governor Stitt. I remember one of the first moments after I stood up and I went back underneath, and they wouldn't let me go near the Jazz locker room, but we were set up as close as we possibly could be. And one of the first things I remember was Governor Kevin Stitt walking right through those doors that I wasn't allowed to go back behind and walking right behind me. And I looked at producer with me that night who deserves a ton of credit, Patrick Abrahams, and I was like, that's the governor. I think something big is going on right now. So, I mean, look, there are so many vivid and visceral memories I have from that night that just jump out at me, Rachel, from all the health officials showing up late into the evening, them shutting a curtain behind it, them arranging and putting on masks and gloves and breaking open all these testing kits and all these little just crazy moments that happened where they were kind of these out-of-body experiences of like, I was supposed to be watching an important basketball game tonight, and instead I'm watching a moment, not just in NBA history or U.S. history, but really world history. So it's certainly, I mean, it's an understatement, but it's a night I'll never forget.
No, I mean, we've talked a lot over this past year, but it bears repeating. The Jazz being stuck in that locker room, having people come at them in hazmat suits as if they all had Ebola. And this is before we all knew what a COVID test felt like, and when they were doing all of the jam it all the way up your nose, back to the back of your throat version of the test, and having all of that happen without them having any of the experience that we have now. It was a totally different feeling. Robert, I think about you and how many years you played in the league and have now been around the league, and there's literally never before been anything like this that happened. You have this expectation, right? The calendar is the calendar. We start at this time, we play on Christmas Day, we do this, we do that, and this ripped all of that apart. What did that feel like for you, Robert, who's been around this game for so long?
It almost felt like when you have a strike. And
Right.
all of a sudden, guys, but you knew there's going to be an end to that. With COVID, you didn't know what was going on. I remember there was some events I was supposed to do for the NBA, and they was going to send me to Istanbul. And I'm like, am I getting on this plane? Or what? I was so scared because there was no knowledge out there about it. It was new to everybody. So I called NBA up, and it's like, oh, I can't go. And it was like, why? I said, because of COVID. And it was like, you okay? I'm like, no, because I don't want to get stuck in Istanbul because I can't come back. And it was so new to everybody in the world, and we were still trying to function and do things, but the smart people was like, oh no, this is not going to be good. This is going to be bad, especially for people like me who watch a lot of movies. I was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And I think the NBA handled it extremely well. I think all sports handled it extremely well. And we, as Americans, are handling it because it was new. It was something we never thought would happen, but we're handling it. Hopefully, there'll be better days and everybody can return to the arenas.
I have not watched the movie Contagion since all this started. I'm just saying that. Ramona, in your piece, Adam Silver talks about the future. What are his thoughts on moving forward as our country begins to climb out of this pandemic?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the more optimistic sounding versions of Adam Silver that we've all heard in the last couple of, maybe the last year, which feels like 10 years, right? I don't know how long it feels to you, but, he said the first thing is, the one thing he's learned throughout all of this is that the virus is in charge. Okay, so he can feel something and think something. The night of March 11th, they had just had all these meetings about, shutting down arenas to fans. That's where they thought they were. And then within a few hours, they're shutting down the league indefinitely. And I asked him at the time, how long did you think that would last? He goes, I really thought it would be 30 days and we'd come back and play games. I didn't think we were going to be 4 months. Okay. But what he said the other day when I spoke to him, on this anniversary that's coming up here, is he said, even just a few months ago, I was not as optimistic as I am now in terms of the future. And for the future, he is optimistic with this caveat, the virus is in charge, okay? Don't think too far ahead, that by next year, by the beginning of next year, which is September, October, that the NBA will start to look more like normal. Like there could be fans, a lot more fans back in stadiums across their league. Right now, there's fans back in about half the stadiums, and they're obviously limited. But even just that sense that the NBA could be back to something resembling normal by the start of next year is really something.
Well, Ramona, everyone should go read your piece on this. There are great details in there. Adam Silver taking calls in his car. Michelle Roberts, too, trying to manage everything. Ramona also has a radio show to go to. Everyone's doing a radio show except for us, Robert. We got to work on that.
I know.
But Royce is going to stick around. Coming up, we're going to be talking about some of the greatest in-game dunkers of all time, sharing the feeling of putting someone on a poster. There's some great video in this piece. You got to see it. Stick with us. Is officially joining the Nets after agreeing to a buyout with the Pistons. He's 31 years old. He's using one of the Nets' veteran minimum contract slots, and not exactly the same player today that he once was, but can definitely still be a contributor. He averaged 12 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists in 20 games with Detroit this season. Zach, does this signing change your outlook on the Nets at all?
A little bit, yeah, because I do think Blake is going to look better in Brooklyn than he did in Detroit. Number one, you'll have the Nick Batum effect. He's going to just want to be there more. And his shot diet is going to be so much easier. Like, his three-point percentage has gone way down because he's taking crazy, difficult, off-the-dribble, step-back looks. In Brooklyn, that's going to be catch the ball, check the wind, launch it up. And I bet he shoots 38% or something from three in Brooklyn. He can be a playmaking center for them now. Will he be part of their crunch time five? You could make an argument that if Jeff Green is going to be a better defensive player than Blake Griffin and a better shooter, both of which have been the case this season, that Jeff Green should be that small ball five in crunch time over Blake. Maybe that ends up being the case. Either way, there's nothing bad about adding a little more versatility, another look. He can play a little bit with DJ if you want to go super big in the right matchup. They've obviously played a ton together. There's nothing bad about adding that kind of flexibility, versatility. So is it a game changer? Is this prime Blake Griffin? Is it possible that he warms the bench when it really matters? All that, yeah, but it still helps. It's helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I'm not saying that this is how I feel about the signing, okay? I feel that with Blake Griffin being signed with the Brooklyn Nets, it doesn't change my outlook on it. I feel like the Brooklyn Nets are still going to be one of the teams to be favored to win the East. Win the championship, whether it's with Blake or without Blake. But adding depth, okay? We don't know if Blake Griffin can come back to his old self, like how he used to posterize a guy like yours truly, Kendrick Perkins, and put him in the rim. We haven't seen that a lot lately. And if they're going to go small, Blake Griffin is going to have to mix it up and be diving to the basket and being able to be that lob threat at the rim. He's not going to be picking and popping as much because he's going to be playing the five. But I think adding him and adding that depth is always good to have a former all-star, former superstar in your back pocket that you could throw out there that's coming in off the bench. Because when you're a contender, especially what's going on for us with the COVID cases, we don't know if guys will be out in the playoffs. This is not like the bubble. Yep. And you got a guy like Blake Griffin that could step in and fill in. Hey, it's still a plus in my eyes.
Yeah, he's a vet who's pretty much, seen everything, if he hasn't quite done everything. And you're right, he's not going to be posterizing people, Perk. It's actually been quite a long time since Blake dunked. This is video of his last slam in a game. This was December 12th, 2019. So he has not dunked in a game for 2 years, and his injury issues have been well chronicled. But Perk, what do you still feel like? His game has gotten so much richer over the years. He hasn't leaned just into his athleticism. What do you like most about watching the Blake version that we have right now, even if it doesn't have all the high-flying dunks?
Well, you know what? To be honest with you, Rachel, his athleticism has kind of went down, but guess what? His skill set has risen, and he's able to do more. I'm watching him on the low block. He's showing a variety of post moves. That's maybe something that Brooklyn could look to utilize. His face-up jumper, his bank shot off the glass is pretty much automatic. And I'm with Zach Lowe. His three-point percentage will increase because he's going to get more wide-open looks. I could see him standing in the corner while Kevin Durant or James Harden is driving to the lane and kicking it out to him, and he's having all the time in the world to step up and hit those shots. So again, yes, we haven't seen the Blake Griffin of old for his athleticism, but he has sharpened his skill set over the past couple of years.
Yeah, Zach, I like that. Check the wind, maybe go down the street to our friend Howard Beck's house, have a little kale salad, come back. Totally fine. All right, guys, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit.
This absolutely does not need to exist. Does anyone enjoy watching this? Look at these two dudes dribbling between cones and then the thumbs down chest pass in the net. That's the highlight. Like, what are we even doing with the skills contest? Why does this exist? Why do we even bother with this, Jalen Anthony Rose? Why?
Oh, man. You know what? I can't front. The pass through the net, it kind of reminds me of some cats that are sitting in an office and they're like, you know what would George Mikan do in this situation? Let's create one of those drills. Next year let's just add the Mikan drill hook. Since big guys are winning it, next year I got a drill. Add the Mikan drill. You do it before every warm-up. We add the Mikan drill next year. You got to make 50 in a row.
What are we even doing? Like, I would even enjoy that. If someone's like, hey, go do this, I'd be like, why? We have the dunk contest, the three-point contest. We don't need the skills challenge. The skills competition should just be over.
Sabonis was the only person that warmed up. And he's the only person that even warmed up.
No more skills competition, Adam. Listen, we all have to admit our failures. We have a ton of failed segments on this program. Over the last 10 years, we've made more failures than successes. But at least we are smart enough to know when we've done wrong, and you've done wrong with the skills competition. Moving on, Mr. Rose, there was one thing that was very nice about last night's event, and that was that the proceeds went to HBCUs. What did that mean to you, and what do you think about that wrinkle?
So for me, Jacoby, some people might look at the $3 million figure and think it's astronomical. Some people might think it's minimal. But what I want to teach everybody is just about the introduction to the NBA audience in the